You're wanting to build a new Ryzen 7000 system, but there are so many motherboard options out there, it could be a little overwhelming. Should you go with B650 or X670? What about the B650E or the X670E? What are those all about? What kinds of features are you looking for? And what's the right board if you decide to choose a Ryzen 5, a Ryzen 7, or maybe even a Ryzen 9? I'll be answering all these questions and more starting right now. Hey YouTube, welcome to Danny's Tech Channel. I spent a ton of time researching and sorting through all the technical stuff for every AM5 600 series motherboard, and I condensed it down into this easy to understand video to help you when making your next purchase. If this type of video is something you enjoy watching, it really helps this small channel grow if you'd like the video, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you'll be notified when we release new content. With that out of the way, let's get started. First little nugget of information I want to give you is all AM5 or 600 series motherboards require DDR5 RAM. You have to have DDR5, so if you're looking to upgrade to AM5 from your AM4 system, like if you have a Ryzen 5000 or 3000 series CPU and you want to make the jump to Ryzen 7000, you've got to buy the motherboard, the CPU, and RAM. You cannot reuse your DDR4 RAM. So just take that into account when shopping for AM5. I might as well start by explaining the difference between the normal B650 or X670 motherboards and their E variants, which is the extreme versions. The main differences between the extreme versions and the standard versions of these motherboards is the extreme versions have higher overclocking potential with better VRM and power delivery. They also have higher memory overclocking, and you get both PCI 5.0 for the M.2 and the graphics. Honestly, it doesn't even matter at this point. The E variants or the extreme versions, I'm really not recommending them to anyone except for that maybe 1% of you who want to overclock or have to have the latest and greatest hardware, because PCI 5.0 isn't even available in anything yet. There is no graphics cards that utilize this, so the PCI slot doesn't even matter, and the storage solutions, there's no SSDs on the market currently. I did see a few of them at CES that you will be able to purchase later on this year, with the extreme versions of these chipsets only targeting about 1 or 2% of all gamers. That leaves B650 or X670. So let's talk about those. AMD made a promise of socket support through 2025 for the AM5 platform. This means that if you decide to buy B650 or X670 and you want to drop in next generation's chip, you'll be able to. AMD is guaranteeing that all the way up to 2025. So these early adopters are kind of getting some incentive to switch over to the new platform. All Ryzen 7000 CPUs are natively supported on X670 and B650 motherboards since they were made for it. However, just remember that the new X3D chips that are going to be coming out, they may need a BIOS update to be able to run that chip. Just be aware that you may have to update your BIOS if it's required. And when new platforms come out, usually they come out with quite a few BIOS updates to be able to fix instabilities and stuff, RAM compatibility issues. That's just something to keep in mind if you're adopting a new platform like this. So if you don't know how to update BIOS, you should probably look into that. I want to highlight some important features that you may want to take into account when you're shopping for a new motherboard. The first one is PCI connectivity and the speed that it runs at. Like I said, the AM5 platform can run up to PCI 5.0. Some of the boards will give you PCI 4.0, some will give 5.0, some have lanes that are only 3.0. The second thing I looked at is rear panel I/O. This is all your USB ports, your input audio, anything on the back of your motherboard there that you can plug something into. I looked at that as well, for connectivity's sake. That holds pretty good weight because there's a lot of things that are USB powered these days. Everybody wants USB ports, but you also want them usable. If they're right next to each other and you've got a fatter USB plug, it may not fit in that slot, so that one's basically unusable at that point. So keep that in mind also when looking at your USB ports or your back panel I/O. Another thing I looked at that didn't hold as much weight as like your I/O or PCI connectivity is Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and then fan headers as well. Fan headers can make the difference between an easy build and a difficult build. If you only have 2 fan headers, but you've got 12 fans, you're going to need some kind of a splitter or a hub to be able to plug those fans into. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth it falls into a either need it or don't need it category. Some people need it because they don't have their computer near their router. Some people don't need it because they run Ethernet and that is it. Whichever one you are, that's what you're going to have to look for when you're shopping. And the last thing that held a little bit of weight, but it doesn't really matter because even the super low-end boards have this now, is BIOS flashback. What BIOS flashback does is it allows you to upgrade the BIOS without having a CPU that can currently run the system. So later on down the road, if you decide to buy a Ryzen 8000 CPU and get a B650 or X670 motherboard, if you have BIOS flashback, you don't even need to put a CPU in there. You just follow the instructions on the manufacturer's website. You'll plug in a thumb drive to the back of it with the BIOS update. You'll hit a button, which is your little BIOS flashback button, and it will flash a couple times and update the BIOS without even having a CPU. What this does is allows you to use that 8000 series or 9000 series, whatever they come out with, without having to buy a 7000 series CPU. Saves you a little bit of money and allows you the newest gen architecture with last gen's board. BIOS flashback, definitely a good thing to have. B series boards used to be the budget option. That's actually what the B stands for, budget. And the X series motherboards were like the high-end boards, the enthusiast boards or whatever. Now the B series boards have kind of transitioned into the average everyday users boards, and the X series are still the enthusiast boards. I recommend B series to everybody. I don't even have an X series board recommended because you can get high-end features on a B series board and just pay a little bit more money. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to recommend a total of 4 motherboards here, and these are just different price category tiers. So first I'm going to start on the lower end, the board that actually I think most people should be getting, and then work my way up. The first one I'm going to take a look at here is the ASRock B650M PG Riptide. This board is fantastic. It looks great. It's a micro ATX motherboard, so it's not a full-size board. If you have a full-size case or you want to go with a full-size case, this might not be the board for you. That may be the only limiting factor, I would say. But the board comes in at $170. It's a micro ATX board. It does have BIOS flashback. It's got a 12+2+1 VRM configuration. It does not come with wireless capabilities though. They do sell the PG Riptide Wi-Fi model, and it's $20 more. So if you need Wi-Fi, you can still get this same board with Wi-Fi installed for 20 bucks. But the board also has a 2.5 gig LAN. If you get the Wi-Fi model, you'll have Wi-Fi. It has a 897 audio codec, which is pretty good for this price board in the category, the low pricing category comparatively to the other boards. It's a pretty good audio output. The board has some pretty impressive I/O when it comes to USB ports. It has 4 USB 2.0s. It has 2 Type A ports for USB 3.2 Gen 1. And then it has 1 A port USB 3.2 Gen 2 and 1 Type C port USB 3.2 Gen 2. It also has 3 fan headers as well. Your PCI connectivity is pretty good, especially for a budget series board. You've got a PCI 4.0 connector for your graphics up here, and then also down here, in your middle 2 sections here, you have PCI 3.0 for add-in cards and stuff. This is where the board actually really shines. If you want PCI 5.0 connectivity, you can get it in this budget series board. They've got a PCI Gen 5 x4 slot for your SSD up top underneath that heatsink. And then the bottom one is PCI Gen 4 x4. So if you have a current PCI 4.0 drive, it'll work in the bottom chipset slot on this motherboard. Now the motherboard is sold out right now. It's on back order on Newegg, probably because it's one of the best price and value boards out there, but this is one of the boards I recommend for pretty much everyone. If you want something a little bit different, maybe a full-size board, let's take a look at the next one. The next board I want to go over is the MSI B650 Tomahawk Wi-Fi. This is a full-size ATX board. It comes in at about $260 USD. Now, if you want to save a little bit of money, you can get the short version, the MATX board, and that comes in about $220. But remember, you'll lose a little bit of connectivity options because of the shorter board. This board does support BIOS flashback like all of these ones in this category do. It's got a 14+2+1 phase VRM. It has 2.5 gig LAN and Wi-Fi 6E. It also has 10 USB ports. It's got 2 USB 2.0. It has 4 3.2 Gen 1 ports Type A. It has 3 USB 3.2 Gen 2 A ports and 1 USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 port. So a lot of connectivity there. I mean, you've got 3 rows of USB ports. You have your Wi-Fi, you have the entire suite of audio outputs, and you even have DisplayPort and HDMI connectors. Now, this board doesn't have PCI 5.0 connectivity at all. I think MSI kind of jumped on it and they said, you know, there is no devices with this storage right now. Nobody's going to need it at this level anyways. You've got PCI 4.0 connectivity for your storage underneath this heatsink and underneath this heatsink. You've also got another M.2 slot right here without a heatsink. And then I like that they have this gapped apart here. So if you put a graphics card into your PCI slot, which is PCI 4.0 by the way, and you want to put another card down here, maybe a capture card or something, you're not blocked by the graphics card in this slot. This is at least 2 slots. Another thing this board has is 6 fan headers. Well, there's actually 7 because there's a pump header as well. So, but you don't have to count that. So 6 dedicated fan headers and a AIO pump header, which you could use as a fan header if you wanted to. Okay, on to the next board. I threw this one in there. This is the Asus ProArt B650 Creator Board. This is kind of a niche market. It doesn't apply to everyone, by the way. But I just wanted to show you that you don't have to spend X670 money to get the quality features that a creator would want. So the ProArt Creator comes in at $270, so it's $10 more than the MSI offering. It's an ATX board. It does have BIOS flashback. It's got a 12+2 power phase. It's got 2.5 gig and 1 gig LAN on the back. You have 7 total USB ports. You have 2 USB 2.0s, and then you have 3 A-type ports, which are USB 3.2 Gen 2, and 2 USB-C ports that are 3.2 Gen 2. And then one of them has a DisplayPort alternate mode. So that Type-C port can deliver transfer speeds up to 10 gigabits per second, which will allow you to do 8K 60 Hertz resolution from a DisplayPort connector. Like I said, it's a niche market, but just know that you don't have to spend a fortune if you want something that can be used for content creation or workspace. The last board I want to talk about is the Asus ROG Strix B650E-F gaming Wi-Fi motherboard. Now, this is the extreme variant. It's not an X series board, it's a B series, but let me tell you about all the features that this thing has and why I recommend this extreme version over an X670 or something. This board comes in at $299 USD. This is like the top limit of what I'd be willing to spend on a motherboard right now. I don't think you should spend more on your motherboard than you do on your CPU, but that's just me. So $299 is the MSRP. However, right now there's a $30 off promo code if you buy it over on Newegg. Link's below, by the way. It's an affiliate link. It doesn't cost you anything, but hey, it helps out the channel. This board is fantastic. I actually am thinking about picking this thing up for myself because it's got so many features. That's kind of why it's the extreme board, because they offer PCI 5.0 connectivity for both the M.2 slot, the top M.2 slot, and the top graphics card slot. So if you want that PCI 5.0, you can enter this tier of performance for $300. And actually, it's cheaper right now, so use that promo code. But you've got PCI 4.0 connectivity for your other ports, as well as your other M.2 slots. You've got tons of USB connectivity on the back here. You have 12 USB ports total, some 3.2 Gen 2s, some 3.2 Gen 1s, and some 2.0 ports. You've got DisplayPort and HDMI, Wi-Fi 6E. You have the whole suite of audio outputs here. I mean, it's got a lot of offerings on this board. This is why it's $300. That's why I don't recommend the X670s, because you can get X670 performance in a B series board. I guarantee you could put a 7950X into this board, overclock it, and this VRM would have no problems. It's a 12+2 phase. It should be perfectly fine for even the highest end chips. So like I said, they kind of over-engineered the B series motherboards this time around. They started with the B550 boards. The B450s were more budget oriented. And then when B550 came out, they gave you a little bit more features, but they charged a little bit more money. Now, all the features are in this B series, B650 and B650E. You're getting all the features, and the price has crept up once again. Unfortunately, this is where we're at in the gaming world. You get a lot, but you're gonna give a lot. That's just the way it is. I do want to note, though, that prices are beginning to drop for both B650 and X670 from how they were when they came out. I think this is due to low sales numbers and low adoption rates of everyone upgrading, because really, if you've got an AM4 motherboard with a 5000 series CPU or something, there's really not a whole lot of incentive to upgrade. You can't use your DDR4 RAM. You have to buy the motherboard, the CPU, and the RAM. So it's a big investment to jump into, and the performance gains are good, but you know, if your current system works as it is, why make the jump? It seems to me that current gamers are happy with their setups. If you're thinking about building something for yourself, what boards interest you, or what do you think you might buy? Let me know down in the comments. I'm just curious. That's going to wrap up this video. Lastly, if you got value from this, don't forget to subscribe and share the video with your friends. If they're looking to build an AM5 system, this might be helpful to them too. And as I always say, I'm Danny with Danny's Tech Channel, and I'll see you in the next video.
Honestly, I'm open wide. I don't feel like waking up without you by my side.